On a regular road, you can kind of trust that there's going to be road in front of you. On the Dalton, you cannot trust the road will be in front of you. There are potholes that will swallow up your front wheel. In the best of conditions, it's extremely dusty. In the wet conditions, the road is covered in like 2 inches of just muck. On the slick mud and gravel with limited traction, zero visibility really, it is just absolutely white knuckle riding, just garbage road. Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Chris, and a couple months ago I rode my bike from Key West, Florida to Deadhorse, Alaska. In this video I'm going to cover how I prepped the bike versus how it ended up. I'll answer a couple of the most frequently asked questions, and I'll get into some detail about the Dalton Highway. So some things that I recommend, don't recommend, what I might do differently next time. So let's dive right into bike prep. The truth is I didn't really do much to prep the bike. It was a 37,000 mile bike when I started. It was all up to date on maintenance. I'd already had 2 new tires with less than 1,000 miles on them. I already had the Saddlemen Dominator solo seat. So I did go get an oil change and a general inspection on the bike. They did find that a bolt had backed out. I couldn't get it tightened back in without taking the pipes off, and I just didn't want to do all that work. So I did take it back into a different Harley shop and have them put that bolt back in. I did buy the tour pack off of Facebook Marketplace, as well as the hard bags. Changed out my leather bags for hard bags, so I could put stickers on them really, but then also to protect the factory leather bags. I did add wind deflectors to the handlebars, and that was not something that I've ever liked before, but I tell you what, that was the best bang for the buck in keeping my hands warm. I didn't do anything to the suspension. I didn't do anything else, comfort-wise. I didn't make any like heated grips or anything. I did have heated gloves, but I left the charger at home, so I just had regular gloves. I also had to do some math with extra fuel tanks. So this is always a problem for me, but I did know that on the Dalton Highway, it was 240 miles. And if we do the math, I needed to carry about an extra 3 gallons of fuel. So I had to find the right style and size containers that would fit in the tour pack. Another question I get a lot is about the cost of the trip. And truly, the cost will vary based on your own travel preferences. The big costs for me were gas, food, maintenance, lodging, and shipping the bike back, which are probably going to be the big costs for everybody, but I'm sure you can do it slightly differently. For me, from Key West to Deadhorse was about $980 in gas. Food, I didn't really keep track of food, but I was eating a lot of fast food restaurants. Sometimes breakfast was included in the hotel. So I wasn't going crazy, but I also wasn't really limiting myself to a certain budget on food. Maintenance was a big one, right? So I had an oil change done in Charlotte before I left, had another one in Calgary. I got a new tire in Fairbanks, and you better believe that tire in Fairbanks was expensive. Just one rear tire. For lodging, I stayed in hotels. I tried to find hotels along the way that were a little bit more interesting than just your regular chain. I tried to find ones with restaurant attached so that when I came in at night, I'd be able to get something to eat. If you camped, you'd save some money on hotels. If you used Bunk a Biker on Facebook, you'd save some money on hotels. So since I knew I was going to be getting in late, I didn't want to inconvenience any hosts, and I didn't want to have to deal with setting up a tent and then break it down before I hit the road the next day. Shipping the bike back was the most expensive part of the trip for me. I rode it, all the way up to Deadhorse, and then I rode it back down to Fairbanks and shipped it home from there. That was really just a matter of timing. The trip took me about 3 weeks, so shipping the bike back just made a lot of sense for me rather than riding it back. It took 2 weeks from the time that they picked it up to the time I got it at home. I get questions all the time now about my own personal fuel issues on the bike. So my bike has a 5-gallon fuel tank. And on a good day, I'm getting 35 miles per gallon. On a bad day, I'm getting 30 miles per gallon. So the math's pretty easy. 5 times 30 should be 150 miles on the tank. Now, as I was crossing the Great Plains in the US and in Canada, it was very flat, very windy, and I was going very fast. And that was the problem. It was just the headwinds. Simply going too fast into the headwinds, I was getting really poor gas mileage. The Dalton Highway is 414 miles, essentially from Fairbanks to Deadhorse, runs basically parallel to the Alaska pipeline. The road is mostly unpaved. There are very few stretches of blacktop. The rest of the road is dirt and gravel mixed with calcium chloride, which is used to keep the dust down in the summer. In the best of conditions, it's extremely dusty. In the wet conditions, the road is covered in like 2 inches of just muck, and it gets everywhere. Make sure that you check your air filter and your radiator if you have one, because once that mud cakes on, it is really hard to clean off. And I've heard that it can cause your engine to overheat. Besides the dirt, you've got long stretches of construction where you'll often have to sit and wait for a pilot truck. So then you've got to follow this pilot truck through the construction site. At one point, there was a 20-mile stretch of construction, and I was going 20 miles per hour the whole time. That is 1 hour of just trying not to fall over in the mud, following this pilot truck. It was the most challenging riding I've ever done, and the weather made it worse. So I rode the Dalton Highway in 4 segments, like most people do, right? 2 days up and 2 days down. So from Fairbanks to Coldfoot on the way up, and then Coldfoot to Deadhorse on the way up, then back down the next day. Deadhorse to Coldfoot, Coldfoot to Fairbanks. The first segment between Fairbanks and Coldfoot on the way north is the easy part. Of course, I didn't realize that until I'd experienced the other segments and had something to compare it to. The first night when I got into Coldfoot, I was spent. It was cold, wet. I was discouraged, knowing that it was only going to get worse and the weather was going to be worse the next day. But I did think to myself, like, hey, this is just a road. People have ridden worse roads on heavier bikes, and I'll just go slowly. Coldfoot itself, it's basically a gas station, a restaurant, a post office, and a hotel, all combined into one. They do offer free camping there, but it was raining when I stayed there, so I opted for the $250 a night hotel room. Clean sheets, hot shower, good food. I was happy. Make a reservation though, because I'm told they do sell out often. There is cell phone service in Coldfoot, and then again, you'll have it for a few miles halfway between Coldfoot and Deadhorse. There is a University of Alaska research facility. It's really the only thing out there, so you'll see the cell phone tower. But that's it. That's it for the cell phone service. I carried a satellite phone just to be safe. At the end of the day, I think that if you needed help in 30 minutes or so, 45 minutes, there would be another motorcycle or a semi-truck, and you'd be able to flag them down. So the second segment then, from Coldfoot north to Deadhorse, is so much harder than the first. The day I did it, it was overcast and raining the whole day. The road was a complete mess, and it felt like the bike was constantly sliding out from under me. And once, it did come out completely underneath me going up the Adigan Pass. So luckily, no major damage. I was going very slowly, had some help picking it up. Really, my only regret is that I turned the camera off immediately after laying the bike down. Really should have left it on and gotten a picture of where it ended up. But anyway, the bike survived. I survived. There are actually 2 major mountain passes on this segment, and climbing them in the mud is scary. But going down the other side is terrifying. Hairpin turns or switchbacks, whatever you want to call them, in the rain, on the slick mud and gravel, with limited traction, zero visibility really. It is just absolutely white knuckle riding, which is the opposite of what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to be calm and gentle and not too tight on the handlebars. But the positive of this is that there is such little traffic on that road that you really can use the whole road to find the best line. So later on that second day, on a flatter stretch, I hit a pothole so hard that it ripped the kickstand spring off my bike. And I did walk back and I found the spring, could not figure out how to get it back on, and there was no Wi-Fi to look it up. So what I did was I MacGyvered a duct tape rope, tied it around the kickstand, and then I would use that to pull the kickstand up, then sit on that rope so my body weight would keep the kickstand up, which kind of worked, except every time I hit a pothole and I bounced off the seat, the kickstand would come down. So it was not ideal at all. About 50 miles outside of Deadhorse, the gravel just kind of suddenly ends, and there's fresh blacktop the rest of the way, until you get to Deadhorse. Now, so then it's back to loose gravel, and not just like a gravel road, but this was like those round pebbles you'd find at the bottom of a fish tank. So they're really soft and they would really move under you. So when the front tire hits it, the front tire wants to dig in and it becomes difficult. So your other option, if you're not going to ride on that, is to try to find a line through these dinner plate sized potholes, which also is very difficult. I did spend one night in Deadhorse at the Brooks Camp, which is right near where the sign, everybody wants to take a picture of the sign, that's at the Brooks Camp. That's the Brooks Camp store. It was very clean and comfortable, had all you can eat convenience store, included in the price. So next day, I did take the Arctic shuttle out to put my feet in the Arctic Ocean. You need to book this shuttle in advance, and it is the only way to get to the ocean because all the waterfront is restricted by the oil companies. It's about a 2-hour tour. The guide tells you all kinds of interesting things about Deadhorse and the wildlife and the oil industry and just kind of the history of the town. So the best advice I received about the Dalton was from two guys who I met in Fairbanks who had just come back down from Deadhorse. And they basically said, don't ride over any puddles because you don't know how deep they are. These could be hiding the potholes that will fit your whole front wheel in it. And they're potholes that are not round. For whatever reason, they are wheel shaped. Your wheel will go right into it. And the other thing they said was don't hit anything on the road that is a different color from the road. If you think it's just a shadow, it's probably not a shadow. It is probably a hole, or it is probably a slick piece or a patch of mud. So don't hit anything that are different colors, and don't hit any puddles. And the best advice I can give after doing it is to relax. Be gentle on the handlebars. Don't force the bike anywhere. Just guide the bike along. So naturally, people ask me if I do it again, and the answer is, yes, right, in a heartbeat. If time would allow for it, I would definitely do it again. But I would do a couple things differently. For most of the trip, I was doing 600-mile days, 12 hours at a time on the road, and that just was not enough time to stop and experience the sights. A lot of times I was just getting gas and get back on the road constantly. So that's one thing I would do. Probably drop it down to between 400 and 500-mile days. Those are enough to see some things in the morning, catch up on highway miles later on in the afternoon, or vice versa. The other thing I would do is stay in a couple different places. So Whitehorse, Yukon, and Jasper, Alberta look like really cool towns, and I stopped for lunch in Jasper, and I didn't really stop in Whitehorse. I just kind of rode through it. And then the other thing I would do is I'd ride an adventure bike. So I'm glad that I did it on my Road King. It makes for a good story. 20-year-old Harley on that road, that's a good story. But I would not do it again on that bike. And then people ask, how is it now, right? How's the bike? It is still dirty. And not just the bike, but everything is dirty. My helmet has dirt in it. My gloves are covered in dirt. The GoPro has dirt in it. Jacket dirty. My chaps are dirty. Like everything is covered in this dirt. So you can get it off. You actually have to rub it with a sponge. Let's see, the suspension on the bike, probably due to be changed. It's the original factory suspension. It's got over probably close to 50,000 miles on it now, and it took a beating on that trip. One of these days I'd like to get it replaced. So I do actually have some minor damage. It's not quite from the fall. It's from picking it up. So the front fender was actually under a guardrail, and as we were picking the bike up, got stuck and kind of bent the fender a little bit. That's about it. So I love answering questions about this. I talked to some folks on the phone about it. If you have questions, let me know. Shoot them down in the comments below, as they say. Safe travels if you're going to do the trip. I do recommend it.